Let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet. Before we go ahead and get started, let's see if the tubes are working today. We made a couple of slight adjustments on the tube situation here, and so we're going to see if they are functional today before we start popping off at the mouth. You know, we always like to double check these things to make sure that we are coming in loud and clear. Are we fired up? Are we going? We're hopeful that it's not the bad volume. It looks like things are good. We're coming in. All right, we're going to jump into it, my friends. It looks like the tubes are connected. That's tremendous. That means we can go ahead and get started. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for confirming it. We got it. All right. Thank you, my friends. And we got Telegram too. It's teamwork. We're making it work. All right, let's get started, my friends. Shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live, the show that spotlights misconduct involving police, prosecutors, and politicians. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney, and today we're talking about Fani Willis in the House. And of course, we know that she's been colluding with the January 6th committee. Where else is she getting all of her evidence? She didn't do much of an investigation, but now it's on display for all of us to see. We're going to get into it because Congress is sending a letter over to her, and we've been following some of these letters from Jim Jordan, from Judiciary, from Oversight, from Ways and Means, right? Digging into all the different Trump investigations and a lot of other things. But we're also going to see that they sent a letter to Fani Willis. Now, this is kind of a follow-up letter. We read the original letter some time ago saying, hey, Fani, we think that you've been colluding with Liz Cheney and Bennie Thompson. And then Fani responded to that. We have not seen that one here yet. So we're going to go through this one. And she just dropped this one out actually a couple months ago, but we're taking a look at it because we need to see what that says before Jim Jordan responds to that letter. And that letter is new and it's recent. We want to also explain why this is such a problem, why colluding between Fani and between Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee, why that's so problematic. And so we're going to get into all of that. We're also then, speaking of the January 6th committee, going to talk about Liz Cheney and why Liz Cheney is causing some problems out there. All right, had to do something there. So Cheney is now also somebody who's saying that Trump needs to be stopped at all costs, and that if he doesn't get stopped, that America is going to be doomed. And Trump is making some headlines about this because he says that I'm not going to act like a dictator if I get reelected, except for day one. And that's a kind of a funny joke, but we're going to talk about that and break that down because they're going hysterical over that. And then we're going to see from Liz Cheney, because Trump is being criticized every time Trump posts a mean truth social, or every time I'm getting a little notice over here on YouTube. Hopefully we're coming in loud and clear on YouTube. What's happening? All right, hopefully it's working. So Liz Cheney, we're going to hear from her saying that Trump is going to terminate the Constitution, saying there's no guardrails that's going to protect him. And this is, what's going on here? Are we not coming in loud and clear? What's going on? All right. So anyways, clear and loud. All right. Apparently it's good. So here, this one is, we're going to go all into that. Then in our second segment, we're going to hear from what's happening in the Hunter Biden saga. So the Hunter prosecutor is now objecting. It says turn the volume up. All right. Let me boost that up a little bit. How's that? We'll crank that up a little bit. All right. I want to make sure it's working before we get into it. Okay. 5x5. All right. Yeah, that looks a little loud now. I don't want to be, zoning out. All right. Just making sure. Things are a little wonky out there. So Hunter prosecutor is now also objecting to the subpoena. Remember, Hunter came in and said, I want a subpoena over Donald Trump. And now the prosecutor is responding and saying, no subpoena. Why would you get a subpoena over the former president? They're trying to say this is selective and vindictive prosecution and so on. And so we're going to go through this because David Weiss is objecting to that. And David Weiss, of course, is the special counsel, the same guy who was part of the original rigging of this whole deal. And now Weiss is objecting to the Trump subpoena. And so we're going to go through that. We'll also take a look at the bank records, which are the subject of a lot of controversy right now because Biden came out at the White House and said, it's all lies. My son and I never did anything wrong. It's all lies. And he's really starting to kind of lose it a bit. So they're probably getting ready to show him the door and insert Gavin Newsom any time now. And so we'll see what's happening over there. Then we'll see what's happening in Congress, because they're giving Hunter a warning. Hey, buddy, it's the holiday season, but you better be here in Congress. All right, we sent you a subpoena, and we're getting scheduled for it. If you're not here on December 13th, Hunty Poo, we're going to be holding you in contempt of Congress. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to jump in and talk about the Trump ballot removal case. There's a hearing that's taking place literally right now, and we'll see if they're wrapped up by the time we get there. But there's a live stream in Colorado, and it's really actually quite interesting. I was listening to it as I was doing some show prep, and they're really getting into it. And Trump's attorney's doing quite a good job kind of taking, parrying questions, parrying concerns from the various justices there in Colorado. So the Colorado Supreme Court. And we got some good video here also out of Colorado. It's like, man, we got picture in picture. It's really great. So we're going to get into all of that and more. And you can see we've got a lot to get to today. My friends, I apologize for the technical problems yesterday. I was up last night after the show. I think I did about 4 or 5 restarts on the full device, on the full system. And hopefully it's working a little bit better, although I'm getting a warning now from YouTube. But I don't think it's a critical warning. It's just saying, hey, if you want, adjust this and things will be better. So I think we're good. But I'll work on that after the stream. But so as you can see, we've got a lot to get to today, my friends. And before we get into the meat and potatoes on the show, we got to make sure that we're healthy and fortified and nutrified. And one of the ways that we can do that is with our friends at Field of Greens. And I know the holidays are here and there's going to be pie, okay, especially apple pie, We just had pumpkin pie. And I know that sounds like fruit. And it is. An apple is a fruit. But it's not exactly. The recommended 5 servings of fruits and vegetables that you need, even if you have 5 slices of pie, it doesn't count. Now, the Mayo Clinic says that if you want to keep and help prevent heart disease, if you want to lower your blood pressure, if you want to lower your cholesterol, then eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. But for a lot of people, that's almost impossible. But that's why you need Field of Greens, because every fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens was medically selected by doctors to support your vital organs like your heart, your lungs, your kidney, your immune systems. You have 2 kidneys. The holidays are here, and you need to stay healthy, my friends. It's now more important than ever. And plus, you'll notice your skin, your hair, your nails, they're all going to look healthier too. And Field of Greens is really the simplest way to get those daily fruits and veggies, and it tastes amazing too. So let me get you started. 15% off your first order. Go to fieldofgreens.com and use code Robert, promo code Robert at fieldofgreens.com. And that way you can get loaded up. They got a bunch of good stuff, not only greens, there's a bunch of other good stuff over there, but go check out Field of Greens. And of course, this statement's not been evaluated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And this product, of course, is not intended to diagnose or treat or cure or prevent any diseases, but vegetables are good for you. And the vegetables want to be eaten. That's why they're here. Look at these things bursting out of the ground with happiness and glee, just saying, eat me, eat me. And this hairdo has also not been approved by the FDA, okay? That's probably not going to happen to you, probably. So also, check it out, fieldofgreens.com, promo code Robert. Thank you. It's good. It is good. Try it with some sparkling water. It's delicious. All right, let's get into it. And my goodness, okay, so we don't have a current stream problem. But one of my speakers here just will not stop playing. It's not like it just keeps playing and playing and playing. It's like, what is happening right now? My tech is revolting against me. Man, when the AI takes over, we're in big trouble. I've stopped it like 3 times. It just keeps restarting. I don't know what's happening. All right, now let's get into it. Fani Willis colluding with the January 6th committee. Not a surprise to anybody who's been paying attention. Nobody has faith that Fani can actually do an investigation on her own, so she got it from Liz Cheney. But we're going to go through what's happening here because Jim Jordan and some members in Congress have been asking Fani for some records because there's a problem here. If Fani did her own independent investigation, if she's somebody who did her own due diligence and really got to the bottom of this before deciding to charge Trump, why does she need evidence and records from the January 6th Select Committee? Why didn't she just get them on her own? Because she's not a federal prosecutor. She's not investigating federal crimes. She's got criminality in Georgia, and there's a RICO case in Georgia, and so we want to have her do her due diligence there. And so we're going to go through a couple letters. Jim Jordan and Congress sent one over to her. They said, hey, Fani, we've been asking for a lot of material from you. You're not giving it to us. We're going to have some problems with you here pretty soon. And then we're going to take a look at the letter that preceded that one, actually, which is where Fani was telling Jordan to go pound sand. So we're going to read this one first and then jump into the more recent one. And then we'll see what Liz Cheney says about this in the context of this, because she was really the figurehead of the January 6th Select Committee, which was illegally constituted in Congress under H.R. 503. But the problem with this, my friends, before we zoom in, we got to zoom out on this. Why is this a problem? Why is Big Fani colluding with Liz Cheney and the January 6th Select Committee problematic? Well, when you are normally under investigation, when there's a normal criminal process that's underway, when you're sitting at home twiddling your thumbs like, oh, I'm not an insurrectionist, and some person, some partisan prosecutor wants to investigate you in a normal world without the Select Committee and without all of that, they would open up an investigation. Let's take January 6th out of it. Just take any other crime. They have to go through the judiciary in many ways to get access to you. If they want a search warrant to your data, they got to go through a judge to sign off on it. If they want to go tap your phones or pull your bank records or something, prosecutors don't have unfettered access to go do that. There are mechanisms in place to protect defendants against overreaching executives, overreaching prosecutors. We have that everywhere in this country. We have a whole justice system that's based on that. That's why we have a judge, and prosecutors don't get to do whatever the hell they want. Mostly. So that is the regular situation. Prosecutor wants to go get something, got to convene a grand jury. The grand jury is supposed to be of your peers, right? They're supposed to authorize certain things, and then you go tap this and prosecute that and subpoena this and subpoena that, right? It's a mechanism. There's called due process there. What happened, though, with Liz Cheney and the January 6th Select Committee? They didn't do any of that, right? They created a fake committee that was supposed to be comprised of 5 Republicans. They rejected all of the Republican nominees because Nancy Pelosi said they weren't qualified. And so she picked the Republicans. The minority party had no consultation with them at all. And they were supposed to have 13 members, 8 Dems, 5 Republicans. Never had that. We had 7 Dems, 2 Republicans. So how is that a legitimately constituted committee under their own rules, under H.R. 503? It's not. So it was illegitimate in the first place. But that being said, they were still Congress, and no courts were willing to say no to them. So when they sent a subpoena, when Liz Cheney, partisan hack, along with Bennie Thompson, who might be a nice guy, I don't know, he kind of just sits there and does whatever Liz tells him. So he and Liz, they were there, and they're sending all these letters out, gobbling up everything. And we read so many of these letters here. We read all of Bennie Thompson's letters, like 18 pages. Give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. I'm from Congress. And they did, right? Everybody's like, oh, crap, Congress is knocking at our door. So they gave them all of their materials and all of their records, and there was no due process there. There was no judge investigating any of this. There was no notice provided to the defense. And anybody who didn't comply with Congress, guess what happened to them? They just turned it right over to the DOJ. Take a look at Peter Navarro. Take a look at War Room. Steve Bannon. Those guys all got prosecuted because they didn't comply with Liz Cheney's stupid, illegally constituted subpoenas. But practically what happened is Liz Cheney gobbled it all up, right? She went and seized it and then kept it on display, kept it in her back pocket and gave it over to the government. Essentially, when Jack Smith came in as special counsel, here you go. When Fani Willis wants it, here you go. And so they got access to this treasure trove that was obtained outside of the properly constituted judicial mechanisms. It is antithetical to American jurisprudence. That's why it's a problem. Now, a lot of people on the left are going to say, well, who cares where it came from? They can just get it wherever they want. And they're okay having a legislative branch act as a grand jury, act as a judge and executioner, essentially. If you don't do what we want, you get subpoenaed. You violate our subpoenas, we turn you in for contempt of Congress, you get charged, you can get convicted like Steve Bannon and may theoretically be going to jail. So that's what's happening here. That's why it's a problem. That's why when Congress looks into this, it's for the separation of powers. It's for the sanctity of the defendant. We don't want this happening in this country, but unless they do. They don't care about any of those old safeguards because it's ma Trump. So now let's take a look at the letters. Enough of the laying the foundation. This is the background here. So Fani sent a letter over to Jim Jordan. We read through the first letter from Congress over to Fani Willis and the people there in Congress in Georgia. And now Fani is responding to that. And here is what that looks like. She writes this to Jim Jordan. This is from Fani Willis. Look at that cursive. How fancy. Very fancy, Fani. And she says, on October 11th, she writes the following to Congressman Jim Jordan. She says, "Hey, Mr. Jordan," says, "I am in receipt of your letter dated September 27, 2023. Says, a charitable explanation of your correspondence there, Jim," this is Fani, "is that you are ignorant, of the United States and the Georgia constitutions and codes." And that's pretty interesting because he's on the Judiciary Committee. He's the chairman of it. Okay. And here, as we see, they tell us a more troubling explanation, you ignorant ignoramus, is an explanation is that you are abusing your authority as chairman of the committee on the judiciary to attempt to obstruct and interfere with a Georgia criminal prosecution. Now, indeed, Jim, you confessed to this motivation. You were on Mark Levin's show in September, on September 10th, 2023. And when you were on with Mark Levin, you said to him, you were discussing one of my office's active in prosecutions. You told Mark Levin, you said, "Hey, Mark, quote, we're trying to get all the answers, but we're trying to stop this stuff as well. We're trying to stop this stuff as well." She emphasizes that in a footnote. She says, "Now, Jim, while you may enjoy immunity under the United States Constitution speech or debate clause, that does not make your behavior any less offensive to the rule of law. Now, as the person chosen by the citizens of Fulton County to be their district attorney, I serve them, and my team and I are exceptionally busy prosecuting Trump and the other co-defendants. They say, we've already written a letter to you, Jim, which I have attached again for your reference, explaining why the legal positions you advance are meritless." And we already read that letter too. Now, nothing you've said in the latest letter changes that fact, Jim. And as I have explained, your requests implicate significant and well-recognized confidentiality interests related to an ongoing criminal matter, as well as serious constitutional concerns regarding federalism and separation of powers. Now, Jim in Congress says to the extent that you have specific questions about the DOJ's communications that she got from their office, right? Because the first letter was, "Hey, Fani, give us the records." We refer you to the DOJ. So go talk to Merrick Garland about it. And to the extent that you have specific questions about our use of federal funds, which he threatened to cut off, we have provided you with extensive information and further information that you can go right here. So she just gave him a website, justice.gov/grants. That's pretty rude, to Congress. Here's a website. How about www.google.com, jerkheads? Use it. Look it up. My attached prior letter provided you with 4 noble suggested uses of your authority as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. 1, enhancing funding for victim authority for victim witness advocates. 2, expanding funding for all types of kits. 3, supporting Credible Messengers program, which helps turn around children in trouble with the criminal justice system, and ensuring adequate funding to support our crime lab so we can deal with all of our drugs, which tests for drugs like fentanyl. Now, I would encourage you to focus your attention on those issues, which would make life better for the American people. Man, she's got some brass, man. Pretty aggressive little stand over there, Fani. And so we are seeing her signature there as well. It is a big flamboyant F for the Fani, as you'd expect. But here is what the response looks like from Jim Jordan. He tells us, on December 5th, back over to the Honorable Fani Willis, says, "Dear Miss Willis, the Committee on the Judiciary continues to conduct oversight of politically motivated prosecutions by state and local officials. Now, although we were aware that your office had coordinated its politically motivated prosecutions with Jack Smith, you already knew that, and we played the clip here, I think it was Newt Gingrich, who said that he heard from a reliable source that Fani got message from Washington, you indict him Monday, like now, like get him indicted. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. Now, we recently learned that your office also coordinated its investigative actions with the Partisan Select Committee on January 6th. So we know that, Fani, you weren't doing this independently, right? You also got information from Jack Smith in addition to the committee. If you had evidence of a crime within Georgia, that's your jurisdiction, why didn't you go do your investigation your own? Why are you taking cues from other people who actually did the heavy lifting? Now, accordingly, they say we write to request documents related to your coordination between your office and the Partisan J6 Select Committee, which is illegally constituted also, I would say. Now, on August 24th, they say we wrote to you, Fani, and your office, requesting the production of 3 categories of documents related to the committee's oversight of the politically motivated prosecutions by state and local officials. Say we already sent you this one in August, and I'm pretty sure we read all of these. The one that we just read is this one, footnote 4, to get caught up. Says your reply letter dated September 7th, it failed to adequately address any of our requests, and it made several baseless excuses for refusing to provide the requested documents. And it's true, man. Fani, you know, definitely has a bit of a disdain for Jim Jordan and the congressional committees. And so, as we continue, says, we wrote again, Fani, on September 27th, explaining in detail the legal deficiencies in your position and offering as a sign of good faith to prioritize the production of certain documents so as to minimize any potential burden on your office. We wanted to play nice with you. But then you responded on October 11th, the one that we just read, rejecting our offer at accommodation and instead resorting to ad hominem attacks on the committee's oversight. And your response letter largely rehashed the same arguments that we considered and addressed in our detailed September 27th letter. And Fani, you again, in your response, you called us ignorant, ignoramuses. Jim, she called you that. You again failed to produce any documents in response to our oversight requests. Saying, Fani, recently, the committee became aware, now this is where we're getting good, we became aware of cooperation between your office and the Partisan January 6th Select Committee. Uh-oh. Fani, we're in possession of a letter dated December 17, 2021 that we've enclosed in this document that we're going to look at. And it's from you, Fani, to Bennie Thompson, chairman of the Partisan J6 Committee. And you are requesting access to congressional records that may be relevant to our criminal investigation. Oh, that's curious. You mean the same exact charge? You mean the same exact criminal investigation that Jack Smith's doing? You mean the same exact investigation that Liz Cheney did outside of the color of law, using the Congress to go cobble together her pseudo grand jury? That was completely rigged? That's what you're talking about? Fani, why do you need those? If you've got so much evidence, you don't. You just were copying and pasting, okay, which is all these people do, right? And it's really true about prosecutors in general. Huge copy pasters, all right? And they're paint by number people too. You ever hear a prosecutor in his trial? I mean, just pick a regular trial. Some of the ones you see on TV, they kind of showboat and stuff like that. But most prosecutors, man, it's paint by numbers. They just oh, what happened next? Oh, what'd you do next? Oh, what'd you do next? Oh, really? What happened next? Okay, and tell me that. What happened next? And then the cops do most of it. And so they, all right, then they copy and paste their transcripts or their templates from one to the next. Anyways, you get the point. So here, specifically, you asked Representative Thompson to copy and paste his homework. Fani, man, unbelievable. For access to records, including but not limited to recordings and transcripts of witness interviews, depositions, electronic and print records of communication, and records of travel. You mean the whole case? Why didn't you do your own interviews, Fani? And it's interesting that there were recordings, because apparently all of those have been deleted now. Now, you even offered that you and your staff were eager to travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with the investigators in person, so there's no trail. We don't want to really send a lot of emails about this, of course. And to receive these records, quote, anytime between January 31st and February 25th. We're in a hurry. We got to indict him. So Jim Jordan says, all right, Fani, look, now, although it is not clear what records, if any, you obtained in your coordination with the partisan J6 Select illegally constituted committee, this new information raises additional questions relevant to the committee's oversight of your politically motivated prosecution of a former president of the United States, in addition to former senior federal officials. Now, the partisan January 6 Select Committee had troubling track record of procedural abuses and due process violations. It only solicited evidence from a select set of relevant individuals. It ignored exculpatory evidence, and it did not pursue witnesses with evidence that would not advance its partisan narrative. Footnote 10. Here's a letter from Jim Jordan to Bennie Thompson. Says it fabricated and publicly released doctored footage that we saw where they were just inserting text messages and other things. And it cherry-picked selective information that created false and misleading public narratives. Now, Liz, to the extent that your politically motivated prosecutions are now relying in any way on records obtained from the partisan January 6 Select Committee, it only reinforces concerns about your commitment to due process and whether you have fulfilled your obligations to properly disclose this material. I just boosted the volume. Is that a little bit better? I just cranked it up just a smidge. Now, Article 1 of the but I want to make sure it's not overdriven. I want to make sure it's not overgrained. So I just kicked it up. Now, Article 1 of the Constitution grants Congress, quote, all legislative powers, and the Supreme Court has held that Congress may conduct inquiries into the administration of existing laws, studies of proposed laws, and surveys of defects in our social, economic, and political system for the purposes of enabling Congress to remedy them. Further, as we have previously articulated to you, Congress, quote, has authority to consider and to investigate legislative reforms to insulate current and former presidents from state prosecutions. Now, pursuant to Rule 10 of the House of Representatives, the committee is authorized to conduct oversight. And so now we're asking you, Fani, to produce the following materials. 1, all documents and communications between the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and the Select Committee to investigate the J6 attack on the Capitol, everything that you guys talked about between these two dates. And 2, all documents and communications referring or relating to records in the possession of the Fulton County DA's office from the Select Committee to investigate the J6 attack on the Capitol. So we want it all. Please provide this as soon as possible, no later than December 19, 2023, right in time for Christmas. Perfect. And we're going to get it. So in addition, we request that the request contained in our prior letters, we ask for that immediately. We don't want any more time on this. Now, as we have previously expressed, the committee is willing to work with you in good faith, Fani, to prioritize the production of your material, and this will alleviate the potential burden on your office. Fani, thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Sincerely, Jim Jordan. And so that went over to Fani Willis. Now, here is the evidence that he ultimately attached that we can see here. This was, once again, from Fani Willis. And Fani, you can see, we have the big flamboyant F over there. Again, it matches the original at Fani on the first letter. So this is the one that she sent from the office of Fulton County District Attorney. Put it on letterhead, December 17, 2021. She says, hey, Bennie Thompson, chairman of the Select Committee to investigate the J6 attack, says via UPS next day air. UPS. Now, dear Chairman Thompson, they want to make sure it got there. Now, they say, as you may be aware, I am conducting, says Fani, a criminal investigation of possible attempts to illegally interfere with the administrations of Georgia's 2020 general election. And through news reports, says Fani, we are aware that your committee has interviewed witnesses relevant to our investigation, saying we understand from the same reports that your committee's investigators may have collected records that are in fact relevant to our investigation. So Fani says, please accept this letter as an official request from me to access records that may be relevant to our criminal investigation. Yeah, that's literally, can I copy your homework? Come on, man. Come on. Just let me see answers 15 through 20. Come on. That's it, man. I don't want to do my own homework, man. I hate math class. Come on. Yeah. Now, those records include but are not limited to recordings and transcripts of witness interviews and depositions, electronic and print records of communication, and records of travel. So she wants it all. And as we've known here, we have questions about where the recordings actually went. Apparently, they are gone. Copy and paste prosecutors, typical. She says, it may well be most efficient for your staff and effective for our understanding, for my staff, for me to meet with your investigators in person. And she wants to go to Washington and hang out with Liz. We are able to travel to Washington anytime between January and February. We'll do our best to accommodate the schedule of the committee. She's like, we're going to Washington, pack your bags. Now, thank you for your consideration of this request. You may contact me directly, via her personal cell phone. I don't know if that's her personal cell phone, or if that's her personal business cell phone, her personal office phone, right? It's kind of what I think you'd call that. When you call that, hey, my office cell, or my mobile is, personal's a little intimate, isn't it? Personal's kind of like, hey, anytime, Benny, what's up, Benny? Text me, bro. Hey, hang out with me, man. What's going on? You want to go get a cup of joe? I don't know what she's saying. I don't know what they're up to, what they're into. Probably talking about insurrections, I guess. But it's personal, very curious. And they want to go travel there in person. Travel to Washington. So, all right. Thank you for your consideration. Here's my email. We want to know what's in those records. And so hopefully Congress subpoenas these phone records. They should form their own stupid select committee, get all the same records. Go to Verizon, go to AT&T, and take a look at those records. What was that? Did Benny send her, a bonus torso photo or something? I don't know, man. These anti-Trumpers are weird. And so my deputy executive assistant may be reached at that number, and that's kind of more in line with what we're talking about, and via email at that. Right, that's more in alignment. So I don't know if it's office cell or personal cell. I have no idea. But, Fani and Benny and Fani and Benny. That's kind of like a sitcom or something. So, all right. So this is the House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary sending this over. And what's so curious about all this, right, is these people were colluding together. I think this is all part of a massive operation, honestly, that we're witnessing unfold, which is just to sideline Donald Trump under any circumstance. No matter what they can do, they've got to stop him from taking power again. And it's wild how they're willing to contort all of the old mechanisms of our justice system in order to get it done. Although maybe they wanted those to go anyways, to be honest with you. A functional justice system is a big impediment towards a tyrannical overtaking of any country. And so if you can get rid of it, you kind of get rid of Trump and you shatter the justice system, and you have half the country that's very excited about doing it, right? You have the Democrats. They're like, yeah, he's a tyrant. He's going to kill us. So they might be getting a twofer on this. We'll see. Of course, we're not going to let that happen. But we're watching what happened, the collusion. And as I explained at the outset of this segment, it was by design, okay? Liz Cheney just was a Hoover vacuum, just sucking up all the data, all the information from everywhere under threat of legislative scrutiny, under penalty of Congress. How dare you violate Congress? And so she was just, without any due process, without any judicial oversight, without any equal protection of the law or any presumption of innocence, she cobbled together a total sham show trial hearing, sold it to many people in the media who still have insurrection nightmares, waking up, in cold sweats. And now she's saying a lot of language that is very provocative. Okay, we're hearing from, in Trump's cases, from Chutkin and from Engeron, Areola, screaming about every Trump statement, every Trump truth is somehow problematic towards their staff, towards their operation of their courts, right? It's a threat towards the Engeron's GF, his Allison Greenfield, the GF. And so on and so forth. It is threats and voicemails and all the things. But what's so curious about this is Trump is gagged, okay? He can't comment on just the very basic maneuvers that are happening in our system, about the justice system, saying that these love notes between Engoron and his Greenfield are very strange. But people like Liz Cheney, who very well may be a witness in the government's case, we don't even know who their witnesses are. She was a congresswoman at the time. She was a part of this investigation. She knows a lot of material about what was happening there. And so maybe she's a witness. And so this woman, Trump can't say anything. Trump's gagged, he's muzzled. But this woman and this guy here, Mark Esper, they can go on TV and say that Trump is literally going to start shooting people in the street, okay? Trump is going to terminate the Constitution. They're going to say all this type of stuff. And I think that they're getting really, really close to almost kind of like they wouldn't be upset about it. If something like happened, something kind of problematic happened. And it makes me sick to even like think about it, but they're agitating, right? Agitating. And it's like, what are they doing here? Why are they saying Trump is going to start shooting people in the streets? Kind of strange. Now, what's so funny about this is Donald Trump came out and he left this comment hang. And man, there is some serious reaction to this comment. And we're going to go through it because Trump said, I'm not going to be a dictator except for day one. And I want to go through this clip because there is a lot of reaction to this. In fact, I had a Politico story queued up that said the following, that this remark, the one that we're about to hear, is causing some serious jolts throughout the 2024 campaign. Insurrection and the dictator remark, and it's going to be testing the GOP rivals on the day of the debate, which is taking place later. So Sean Hannity, they said, was trying to throw Donald Trump a life vest, and I'm not so sure about that. I think it was one of the more ridiculous questions I've heard. But at a town hall on the eve of this, Trump got asked this question, and the timing is very significant. Apparently, there are 4 remaining challengers. They're going to go debate this. A lot of people are concerned about it. They said, oh my gosh, Joe Biden said, see, Trump's not even hiding it anymore. He is going to be a dictator. He is going to seize power. He is going to shoot somebody in the middle of 5th Street. Remember that comment? And all the things. So they're having a meltdown over it. And we're going to play it, and then, of course, we'll do some review. Here is Trump saying, I'm only going to be a dictator on day one.
Issue, though, because the media has been focused on this and attacking you under no circumstances. You are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
what?
he's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's not retribution.
I'm going to be, he keeps, we love this guy. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
So that sounds to me like you're going back to the policies when you were president.
That's exactly
the issue.
Okay, so Hannity's having a little bit of an aneurysm right there. He's going into some serious cope mode, and he asks one of the most asinine questions ever. Why is he even validating this in the first place? Okay, Trump acting as a tyrant or a dictator. Okay, Trump didn't come into office and weaponize the FBI and the DOJ against his political opponents. A lot of people wanted him to, by the way. A lot of people said that he should go in there and lock Hillary up. Remember, lock her up. Remember all that stuff? He didn't do it. And he left the White House. And the country was in a lot better shape. Right? The tyrannical tendencies that the Democrats are seeding into people's brains right now are asinine. They're totally disconnected from reality. They just have cobbled together and almost hypnotized their portion of the population into thinking that January 6th and the imagery we saw there with some flags and a bunch of MAGA hats and Trump flags all over the place, which I still think were largely, they're orchestrated by feds. We had 50 feds in the Proud Boys trial, hundreds more, many have alleged, even Congress people like Clay Higgins have said that. So all of this was just a massive psyop, and now every time Trump comes out and says anything, there's already this laid out premise, this foundation that he is this tyrant or something like that. He's got no tyrannical tendencies relative to what the Democratic Party has done. Let's think about what they've done. They have weaponized the entire DOJ to go after thousands now, over 1,000 plus Americans for protesting, for rioting on January 6th, calling them insurrectionists, charging them with obstruction crimes and impeding police, right? And some of the ones that are there for assault are minor scrapes and bruises, stuff that is a scale minuscule to the BLM Summer of Love that this entire country witnessed. And I mean that not only in terms of damages and injuries, but monetary damages, right? A couple $1 million at the Capitol, none of which I endorse, but BLM was billions of dollars of burnt down buildings. They torched the whole police precinct down there in Minneapolis. So it's a totally different scale. FBI raiding Trump's house, right? We're seeing classified documents problems with Joe Biden, but Trump gets indicted for it. Hillary had classified documents, no problems for her. So the whole situation, the tyranny comes from their party. 234 years of historical precedent shattered because they don't want this guy to win again. And Hannity, for all his, rationality, thinks here that this is a good question. You're not going to be a dictator. Come on, man. Hannity, he can pick up the same tools that they leave behind. This is what we've been saying for years here. If the Democrats want to cross this bridge, if they want to use this tool, we decided that we're not going to use swords at each other in American politics because we don't really want to knife the country and bleed out together. But what we were using were pool noodles. Okay, we hit you hard. Yeah, maybe it hurts a little bit, but that's fine. Now we got swords, right? If the Democrats are going to be swinging at the right with swords, well, the Republicans are going to pick it back up, right? And they're going to use the same tools. And I don't mean that, in a violent manner. I just mean it's the death of the judicial system. It's the death of the country when you start hacking each other to bits. But if the Democrats are going to use those tools, right, the vernacular is if they're going to kick you in the nads, if they're going to hit you below the belt, the other side is now going to use that same mechanism, that same tool against them. And if you're going to sit here and say that Trump shouldn't undo and reverse everything that the DOJ has done, Trump shouldn't undo and reverse everything the FBI has done, that's crazy, man. That's why we want to vote for this guy. So he does that. Go prosecute all these people, man. They prosecuted 1,000 Trump Republican people calling MAGA extremists from Biden's Gates of Hell speech. Okay, that's fine. Got to go back, go prosecute 1,000 Democrats, right? If they're going to go and Sean Hannity got his text messages subpoenaed by Liz Cheney, okay? And he's going to sit here and worry about Trump being a dictator? Are you kidding me, bro? What a ridiculous question. So he asks Trump that, and quite frankly, I hope Trump does use the same tools. Absolutely. It's a problem for America. And what I would hope is Trump would be sort of like George Washington, use that power and then get rid of it. Say, we're done with this, right? And then turn the country back to norms. One can hope and dream, but that's the point. Once you cross this bridge, everybody gets to use it. And it's the downfall of the country. And unfortunately, the Democrats are the people who started it. And so here is Liz Cheney now using very problematic language saying that Trump is going to come here and end the entire country, unravel the Constitution. And she gets to say this stuff while Trump is being gagged in two different cases, in the J6 case out of Washington and out of New York, both of which are working their way through appeals right now.
The threat is exactly what you've laid out. The threat is that this is a man that we don't have to guess what he would do. And in some ways, the extreme nature of the claims that he's making, of the lies he's telling, of the calling for General Milley to be executed, those things are so extreme that what happens sometimes in our body politic is people ignore it. People say, well, that's just him. And I think that the challenge that we're facing now is very clearly understanding and recognizing he means what he says. The people who invaded the Capitol, frankly, on January 6th, you can look at scores of those defendants who have said specifically, we came because he told us to come. He told us to do this. He knows that people will follow his instructions. And if he's elected again, those guardrails, those individuals, for example, who stopped him won't be there. And think about what it means to have a president who won't enforce the rulings of the courts.
It's insane.
It will be the unraveling of our constitutional system.
Joe Biden just basically ignored the courts, right? He just does what he wants with student loans and other things. We've already seen that. He said, well, we're just going to do this. What's your legal basis to do it? We'll figure it out. They just do it, and then they pay for it after the fact. We've already literally seen that from them.
Every time people hear my former Republican colleagues talking about the weaponization of the Justice Department, I really urge them to stop and think about what that is. That's Republicans attempting to do Donald Trump's bidding, attacking one of the most foundational and important aspects of our republic.
That's true. You guys ruined it. You wrecked it this year by going after your political opponents, and now you're trying to get everybody else to recognize how serious it is. This is how you know they're in serious trouble, okay? When she is telling you that you have to think, we got to get people to believe that we're legitimate, that's a problem, right? If the case was legitimate, the case would speak for itself. Like, you don't have to go and validate the prosecution of a murderer, right? A lot of people, for example, take the Kohberger case or something like that, right? You don't hear the cops coming out here and saying, well, our prosecution is really needed here because there's dead girls here and dead people. No, it's all just obvious, right? Everybody just knows that. Like, okay, it's just, yeah, you guys got to do, yeah, thank you. Nice work keeping our neighborhood safe. Thank you for that. When you have to come and justify your prosecution, man, you are already behind the ball. You're way behind. And we've got two things happening here. We've got the court of law, which in my opinion, in at least one jurisdiction is a total joke and a sham. But in the court of public opinion, which is really what this is about, they are scraping the bottom. They're having a difficult time. So that's Liz Cheney. Now, her language is getting very aggressive. People need to take seriously and literally that he is going to terminate the Constitution, unravel our democracy. It's a risk we cannot take. So what are you going to do? Terminate the Constitution? Unravel our democracy? Okay, if Trump says stuff like this, just reverse this and put Judge Engeron in here, or Allison Greenfield, or anyone else, right, who is actively, Letitia James, or Judge Chutkan. You start putting Jack Smith in here, Molly Gaston. Trump says this. Trump posts Molly Gaston, a prosecutor from the DOJ who's got a long history of anti-Trump bias even before January 6th. Molly, Trump says, is unraveling our democracy and going to terminate our Constitution by imprisoning me. Trump says it's a risk we can't take. What if Trump said that? It's a risk we can't take to allow Molly or deranged thug Jack Smith. They would go friggin' from the rooftops, man. But Liz Cheney can say it about Trump, and Trump can't really comment on it because she might be a potential witness in the January 6th case. That's what kind of a sham this is. Here is Liz.
Whatever you do, whatever you think about, the possibilities that Donald Trump might present, he's not an acceptable option. He's not an acceptable alternative. I hope that he is defeated in the primary.
But what?
But if he's not, we have to defeat him in the general.
Okay.
And people need to take seriously and literally what he's saying, which is that he would, in fact, unravel our democracy, potentially terminate the Constitution.
Pretty aggravated. It's a risk we can't take. I don't know what that means. Maybe something might happen. Hopefully not, but that's where this is going. And if Trump said that, man, he'd be indicted again for it. So here's the last clip. This one came out from Trump's former Secretary of Defense. His name is Mark Esper. Now, this is what this guy is saying. And we've seen this from some of the people on The View, sort of screaming from that show that Trump was going to put people on the border and start executing people coming across. It's like, well, did he do that the first time around? No. All right. You think he's going to do that the second time? Okay. So here is this guy saying that Trump was actually suggesting shooting Americans on the street. And so, if they blame Trump for this stochastic terrorism. Trump is agitating people. Trump's causing people to get out there and get violent. What kind of language is this from these people? Very irresponsible, almost insurrectionary, isn't it? Here is Mark Esper, so-called.
Eventually it culminated, the long break, simmering break between he and myself in June of 2020 when he wanted to deploy active duty troops on the street of Washington, D.C. and suggested actually that we shoot Americans in the street. So, that's kind of more what you'll see, this very hyper-aggressive behavior and this, willingness to flaunt norms and rules, if you will.
Yeah, so Trump
eventually it culminated.
Trump's just going to shoot people in the streets is what this guy is saying. So, all right, that's the gist of it. So, all right, now that is a wild clip. I guess that guy's living in a different reality than the rest of us. But all right, that is what we've got. Liz Cheney and others really escalating the rhetoric. A lot of the language getting very, very problematic there. And we can see here that we'll be continuing to cover this, my friends. We'll see what Fani Willis says in response to Jim Jordan's request. And we'll see what Liz Cheney says in response as well. We'll be here continuing to cover this and more. Thank you for subscribing, my friends. Thank you for joining us wherever it is you're watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, so let's carry on. I'm trying to keep tabs on how the feed is doing and how the volume is sounding. All right, so we're checking on the volume, and I don't know if it's going to be ultra loud or not on the recordings, but we'll see. All right, we're playing around. Thanks for working it out with us, working the kinks out here today. All right, now let's carry on. Now this one is also an interesting one. Here we have the prosecutor in the Hunter Biden case is objecting to Hunter's request for a Trump subpoena. Hunter wanted Trump to come in and testify in his case, and David Weiss, the guy who really was responsible for the deal that Hunter was going to sign in the first place, is now objecting to Hunter's request for a subpoena. And the docket, as we can see here, showed us that this was part of a big request from Hunter's team. You see, there was a motion for 4 different subpoenas, one for Donald Trump, one for Jeffrey Rosen, one for Richard Donahue, and one for William Barr. These came from Trump's attorney, Abe Lowell, and this was submitted, and this is the response from David Weiss. Now, we've already talked about the Hunter plea deal that was derailed when the government tried to cobble together this diversion deal that ultimately was called out by the judge, and the judge rejected it. But now Hunter is playing hardball. We've already covered these subpoenas. We've covered some of Hunter's tactics, and I think this is very precarious for the DOJ because the DOJ is daddy, right? Like, he's fighting his daddy. And the original strategy, I thought the better strategy, was to just kind of lie down, let the DOJ enter this thing, not object to it, and bury the whole thing because he could then claim immunity later down the line. But that has not happened, and so now this case is active. So he wants to subpoena a bunch of people. I'm sure the DOJ is very unhappy about it. I'm sure the White House is too. But this is what David Weiss says in response to the filing. Says in the writing, where did it go? Let's pull it up. All right, I think I don't have that PDF pulled up, so let's pull it up. It's a bigger one. I pulled up the order, not the actual PDF, which we don't want because the order is only 1 page. And so now this is the actual motion that we want to read through. So let's get to it. This is David Weiss, the Hunter Biden prosecutor's objection to Hunter Biden's request for a subpoena, and Hunter wanted to subpoena Donald Trump. You can see this is the case out of the District of Delaware. It's a 32-pager, and it's from David Weiss's office. The prosecutor who's actually writing this is Leo Wise, the same guy that we've seen previously in on this case. And he says, okay, Hunter's lawyer and judge, we oppose Hunter's request for a subpoena. Says now, Hunter asks the court for an order directing subpoenas, which they say broadly seeks broadly worded categories of documents. They want 7 years of material from former President Trump and Bill Barr and 2 other former officials from the DOJ, saying that Trump contends that the requested material goes to the heart of his pretrial defense. I'm sorry, this is not Trump, this is Hunter. I'm still in Trump mode. Hunter contends that the requested material goes to the heart of his pretrial defense and that this is possibly vindictive or selective prosecution that arose out of the incessant pressure campaign that began in the last administration, which is Trump. So Hunter is blaming Trump for this prosecution originating. He said, I never should have been prosecuted. Nobody's been prosecuted for these types of crimes. This is just a simple gun charge. What gives? So he wants to go after Barr and Trump and others. Now, it is worth noting from the outset that Hunter misunderstands the difference between pretrial arguments to dismiss an indictment and trial defenses. And Abe, I don't think, is a real criminal defense lawyer, so here is what he says. Now, it is black letter law that claims of vindictive and selective prosecution are not trial defenses and may only be litigated pre-trial. They're not defenses, and therefore they're not argued to juries. But in any event, if Hunter and his lawyer think that this was selective prosecution, well, those claims turn on the actual intent of the decision maker here. And here, that's the special counsel. That's David Weiss. But not only does Hunter and his lawyers, not only do they fail to identify any actual evidence of bias or vindictiveness or discriminatory intent in part of the special counsel's part, but Hunter and his arguments also ignore an inconvenient truth. Namely, no charges were brought against Hunter during the prior administration. when the subpoena recipients actually held office in the executive branch. It's a great point there, David. Trump didn't even prosecute Hunter, let alone Hillary. Okay, all of that was stalled. Didn't go after anybody. Now they're going after his entire family and trying to dissolve the entire company. Instead, every charge in the matter was or will be brought during the current administration under Joe Biden. So it's not corrupt in that way, which is true, but is also part of the cover, right? It's like there is a lot of other criminality here, and David Weiss was brought in to cover this whole thing up. So that he's saying, he's like, hello, that's like why I'm here. I'm here to cover this thing up. One in which his father is the president of the United States and Merrick Garland is the attorney general, and they appointed the special counsel. So he's saying, look, I am independent. Even this guy's own daddy knows that. Hunter has not shown, nor can he, how any external statements by political opponents of President Biden, in this case Trump, improperly pressured him, right? He's saying Trump is weaponized the DOJ against me and his attorney general or the special counsel. He says, how could that happen? How could Trump push President Biden to push me to push you? That doesn't make any sense. So he says, well, the government in all cases, as in this case, is entitled to the presumption of regularity. We're not doing anything corrupt here in the discharging of the duties. And Trump's claims provides nothing to rebut that presumption, but conclusory assertions in the pursuit of narrative. Now, Weiss says, in seeking discovery for a claim of selective prosecution like Hunter is attempting to make, he fails to even identify even one similarly situated individual who is not prosecuted for similar conduct. He says that omission alone precludes discovery. So he hasn't even given us one example that even resembles what he's claiming happened here. And so that's it. U.S. versus Armstrong says you got to at least have one thing pop up, saying Hunter also identifies no constitutionally protected class that he belongs to, and we need that stuff in order to make a claim. Saying Hunter also fails to articulate any basis for vindictive prosecution, so not just selective, like you picked me and not them, but also vindictive, like you picked me out of nobody. Says Hunter fails to identify what constitutional or statutory right is being punished. Under long settled law, we need more. Further, Hunter does not claim that there is a presumption of vindictiveness that applies here because there's no actual evidence of any vindictiveness. And lastly, this case supports our claim as well, saying that here, while Hunter has not yet filed any pretrial motions to dismiss yet, the basis for his subpoenas are under those claims. And so therefore, his request for discovery requires that he meet the pleading standard that's established by Armstrong. He's got to show this stuff before the subpoena comes in. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to summarize the law that he needs to make before we show why it's problematic. First, he says, first of all, the Constitution gives the government broad discretion to the executive branch. Says we do have executive power that's assigned to the president. Actually, this could be interesting. And it provides to the president, right? To the president, executive power to the president, the person, and provides that the president, not the office of the president, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That's why Trump is the root power of the country. And I know people don't like to hear that, but it's true. The president is literally above the law, right? Like it starts with him or her. Under the Constitution, the executive branch has exclusive authority and absolute discretion to decide whether to prosecute a case and how to prioritize and how aggressively to pursue legal actions against a defendant who violates the law. Now, not only does the Constitution assign enforcement decisions to the executive branch, but also as a practical matter, also gives them the standards for assessing the propriety of their cases. And here, Hunter fails to show evidence that's clear of discriminatory effect or discriminatory intent. When a defendant alleges selective prosecution, they have to show some things. And in explaining the limitation on prosecutorial discretion, the Supreme Court gave us some rules. But Hunter, in this case, has the burden to plead a theory of selective prosecution that would allow discovery, and he has not done so. Okay, so he's asking for subpoenas, but he's got to go through a different mechanism by saying, I think it's selective prosecution and I want access to the government's prosecution files and their emails so I can see whether this is prosecution that is being done selectively or not. saying the government briefly notes that other theories of selective prosecution fits his case even less. For example, in some cases, any defendant, may not need to show these elements if the executive branch, if their action was overtly discriminatory, but it's not. This is not an African-American case. But here, Hunter and his motions, they contain no argument. They contain no evidence in support of any of these claims. Instead, the arguments that Hunter advances appear to fall within the ordinary formulation of selective prosecution, and that requires proof of disparate treatment and discriminatory intent, nothing that we have here. And he says courts of appeals have also said the following. Armstrong made clear. Right? This is a very robust response to this. And it's curious, right? He's basically educating Abby Lowell, which is Hunter's lawyer, and saying that here the argument is particularly weak in comparison to even other claims. First, Hunter does not claim that the charging decision in his cases, whether to prosecute him, are motivated by his membership in some protected class under heightened scrutiny. Nothing there. And second, he offers no evidence whatsoever of a discriminatory effect. Like, what are the consequences here? And third, as to discriminatory intent, he offers no evidence that the relevant decision makers were motivated by any intent that equal protection standards prohibit. And so, having failed to make even a sufficient preliminary showing, defendant cannot meet Armstrong's standards for getting discovery on these issues. Saying Hunter also focuses his narrative about the selective prosecution, saying he's being singled out, by focusing on the actions of non-prosecuting officials from the prior Trump administration. However, after a change in the administrations to the one that's headed by his daddy, like this is why I was thinking this is going to be messy, because they're going to have to point this out. Like, all the claims that Hunter makes against the DOJ are going to look bad against Joe Biden. He's basically fighting with his daddy's office in public. It's like the last thing they wanted, which is why they wanted to just cram through the plea deal. Now, he says he leads a competing political party. The president's current attorney general personally used his discretion to direct a full and thorough investigation of these matters. That's Merrick Garland. And conferred to the special counsel statutory or regulatory authority to prosecute this case, which, I believe was largely a cover-up. I mean, they got caught red-handed the day of the plea deal. It was wild. They were going to squeeze this whole thing through. Nobody would have been any wiser. Well, we would have known what they had done, but the media would have not caught it. So thus, or they would have used it as an excuse. So thus, Hunter's claim of selective prosecution, it must contend with the presumption of regularity, not only for the special counsel and their decision to prosecute, but also the Attorney General's decision to even appoint the special counsel in the first place. And Hunter has shown no evidence of animus or improper motive at all, other than the current Attorney General acted outside of pocket. And lastly, Hunter points to nothing about the circumstances of his case that would weigh against his prosecution. Hunter acknowledges himself to committing the criminal conduct. He wrote about it in a book, admitting to it. Oh my gosh, this is great. He wrote a book, and in that book, he said that he was addicted to crack cocaine in 2018, the year in which he illegally purchased a gun. That's right, he did. As discussed in Armstrong and other cases, factors like the strength of such a case and its general deterrent value are also quintessentially permissible considerations for the case to proceed. He wrote publicly, "I'm on crack buying guns." So the DOJ is like, we got to do something about that, right? Because he wrote a book. And this is exactly what the DOJ did not want to do. This is why David Weiss is the same guy who tried to cram this deal through. And the deal that they made was because Hunter and his lawyer were threatening this stuff. Okay, this is going to get messy in public. Do you really want to do that with your boss? And they said, no, we'll give you a smoke and plea deal to avoid this. And now they wrecked that. But Hunter should have still pled guilty, I think, to one of these crimes. A misdemeanor. He should have pled guilty to the misdemeanor, no problem. Or tried to cram that through, but he said, no, I'm not doing it. And his lawyers threw a fit. He threw a fit. This is what you get, man. You had a smoking deal. You should have just fell on it. And I've had a lot of conversations with clients this way. All right, man, they're going to revoke everything if you deny this. Okay, all right, let's go. We're going to trial then, because Hunter probably thinks that Hunter is not a well person, right? He's a deluded person who's had his entire life covered for him and been exploited. I actually have some empathy for the man, because I think he's probably been abused and exploited his entire life, right, ever since he was a boy, by this corrupt DC satanic death cult that lives there. But the point is, right now he's on their team and he's playing along, and he's been exploiting and abusing people for his entire life, showing no remorse for it, whatever. And now he's in this, I don't want to psychoanalyze the guy, but I've worked with people that have a hard time coming to terms with the consequences of their action. And so he is sitting there with a lawyer sitting across the table from him saying, "You idiot, please take this plea deal, man. It's a misdemeanor for a stupid gun charge. Who cares?" No, I didn't do it, man. Trump's prosecuting me and I'm not going to take it. And somebody else is probably, breathing down his neck. Don't take this deal. He hires Abe Lowell, who's going to charge him a fortune for this. And his other lawyers are going to pay for it. And it's going to get pretty bad. And now David Weiss is backed into a corner. Now David Weiss can't say that the DOJ is corrupt and partisan, right? Because Abe has really opened the door on it. It's going to get pretty messy. So it is unremarkable, therefore, that a prosecutor would choose to pursue charges on such a discretionary factors. It's not even a big deal. And that Hunter faces a significant uphill battle to demonstrate any discriminatory effect or intent. I think it's the opposite. I think Hunter has, even these charges alone, right? The fact that this case involves gun charges and tax charges is like a joke. There's a whole book of potential charges that could be there, a whole book of them. All right, and that's just scratching the surface from our friends at MarcoPoloUSA.org. Get your copy there. So it's like a joke, right? They're actually getting a benefit, and they're saying, how dare the DOJ come after us? So they say Hunter also argues that discovery is warranted to support a vindictive prosecution claim, but that vindictive rather than selective. So selective meaning they picked you out of everybody else. Vindictive meaning they're just picking you because they hate you. Both of which apply to Trump actively. Now, a vindictive prosecution claim requires the following: that the government seeks to punish a defendant, think about Trump, for exercising a constitutional or statutory right like his First Amendment that he possesses. And saying here, there's a framework, Supreme Court has articulated that, and giving us all the rules. But here he says, look, all of that. Hunter never even squarely identifies what right he is purportedly being punished for. For what? Breaking the law while on crack? That doesn't make sense. Now, the case law makes clear he's not entitled to a presumption of vindictiveness here. The prosecutor is entitled to a presumption of regularity, and he offers no more than mere speculation, and he cannot meet the heightened standard that's necessary to obtain discovery. Now, he's not satisfied any thresholds that are necessary to obtain discovery anyways. So he's got no theory of selective prosecution. He's got no membership in a protected class. He's got no rational justification for this. If anything, it's a sweetheart prosecution. And he's failed to make the necessary minimum showings of anything. And so at minimum, he has to show more. And he's giving us a lot of case law here. Even says, hey, the Third Circuit also says the following. More recently, the Third Circuit said this, and Hunter's motion, in light of all of that, it does not even attempt to make a showing of a similarly situated individual who was not prosecuted. Okay, show us someone else like Hunter who you say didn't get prosecuted. No, anybody like Hunter with all of these mounds of crimes got prosecuted a lot more. Like, they don't want to go down that road, right? Abe Lowell can't do that. If he goes down, he's like, well, this guy, yeah, maybe he went to prison. Maybe this guy did go to prison. There's nothing to compare it against because Hunter's case is horrible. It discusses no comparators at all, right? That's because they can't, right? Because Hunter's case is very bad. This is already a smoking deal, which is why they're biting off a lot here. Like, they're being a little bit too ornery for their own good. Much less articulates the basis because they're backing the DOJ into a corner. The DOJ now has to strike. And you don't want to do that, man. You just want the DOJ to just kind of, okay, just work this thing out. Now, the court could find that they are similarly situated, but on the issue of vindictiveness, Hunter, again, does not identify what protected right he presents, and these deficiencies in this pleading for discovery warrant denial. But here's why The motion also fails the basic standards even for the issuance of the subpoenas, saying, all right, look, let me explain how the rules work, is how the prosecutor's going here. In addition to the pleading standards, Rule 17 was not intended for getting discovery, right? You're kind of using the wrong mechanism here. Saying in Nixon, the focus was to explain how Rule 17 subpoenas work. And here, Hunter is trying to use Rule 17 for his pretrial claim. He relies almost exclusively on languages about Rule 17 and says that I can use this rule. But Nixon, the case, explicitly addressed its requirements for subpoenas. In that section, it said you got to have good cause. It is limited for evidentiary materials, not general categories of arguably relevant documents. You don't just get to use them for whatever you want. Now, as SDNY has previously explained, subpoenas are only to obtain admissible evidence, okay? Admissible evidence. That's the standard. You can't just use subpoenas to get stuff you're interested in looking at. You get a subpoena for admissible evidence. And here, Hunter, arguing that these documents are material to his defense, no. His defense could be that it could be construed so broadly that it could encompass Trump documents, even though the charges in this case were brought by the special counsel, says no, this is crazy. It's way beyond its recognized scope of the rule, Rule 17C. Hunter is far outside of it, not authorized to use the subpoenas to get it. Now, they say at the time of this investigation, the special counsel was sitting attorney, U.S. attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, a presidentially appointed and Senate-confirmed office. Federal law gave him the authority to prosecute this case, and that's what he did. Now, if you look at this, absent that backdrop, the gaps in Hunter's motion become glaring. Absent is any credible argument that one of the subpoena recipients, like Trump, rather than the special counsel, made the decision to prosecute this case. David Weiss saying, I'm the prosecutor, man. I got appointed to do this whole thing. And that the special counsel himself has treated similarly situated individuals differently or decided to prosecute them for discriminatory purposes. In fact, throughout the defendant's entire constructive narrative, he barely refers to the actions or the motives of then special counsel now. Not even referencing him. It's all Trump's fault. So he's not in office. He didn't prosecute you. Your daddy appointed this dude. So Hunter's attempts to manufacture discriminatory treatment or discriminatory intent on behalf of the U.S. attorney fall apart under the most minimal scrutiny. First, Hunter obliquely references that the IRS files reveal that Richard Donahue coordinated with the Pittsburgh office and the prosecution team in Delaware. So IRS coordinated, including certain guidance and other things. Looking behind this phrase reveals the actual overt steps involved. He says the U.S. attorney made an independent decision. There's nothing nefarious here. There was direction by Donahue that the Delaware investigation receive information from Pittsburgh. Nothing problematic there, citing a reference call. We assessed the validity of a warrant. We got information about it. Next, Hunter alleges that certain investigative decisions were made as a result of the guidance provided. He says, yeah, in fact, sources yet cite that they simply did not conduct any proactive interviews yet, and we already followed the longstanding DOJ department policy. In other words, the most defendant claims Hunter is that the Deputy Attorney General's office was aware of and involved in some specific investigatory decisions in the most banal fashion possible by waiting to take specific steps at certain times out of caution. So in other words, saying that the DOJ waited to do anything, and that is evidence of action. Says none of these contacts, none of these events provides any evidence involving either the disparate treatment of individuals under the law, and says perhaps even more glaringly, Hunter is now even focusing his final narrative arc entirely on the existence of public statements of a former President Trump, no longer in office, and congressional politicians, none of whom have any authority to direct the special counsel to do anything. Saying Hunter's real argument is that if political actors uninvolved in the prosecution claim credit or leverage the prosecution for their political ends, those statements then cause the special counsel to do something. There is nothing more, that is nothing more than a conclusory assertion fundamentally at war with the presumption of regularity And the special counsel is presidentially appointed, Senate confirmed, and so has his duties to act impartially. So to permit a subpoena based on these peripheral atmospherics, like that, would render Armstrong a dead letter of the law and would allow for expansive discovery. People would use subpoenas for everything. You just subpoena whoever you want. Anybody, everywhere. Unsurprisingly, Hunter's subpoena requests follow the same patterns as his allegations, and they fail to meet the standards. He's got several categories. Category 1, he says a category could include any random citizen's letter urging a text message or formal charge. He wants category 2, which communications from or to the subpoena recipient about the executive branch employee anywhere in the government. Hunter wants everything from every employee in the government, right? It's like nuts. Hunter seeks even uncommunicated personal thoughts and musings by any subpoena recipient. Hunter also wants diaries, journals, personal notes from everybody who gets a subpoena. Trump, everybody. Says category 4 seeks any document that even mentions the defendant among those produced in an entirely unrelated congressional investigation. Now, these requests simply do not target the elements of defendant's actual selective or vindictive prosecution's claims. They're just way too overbroad, and they don't meet the standards. Now, lastly, independent of its other glaring effects, they say Hunter's request does not even come close to the specificity that's required under the law. Indeed, Hunter's sweeping subpoena requests contain numerous requests that amount to the kind of fishing expedition that courts have condemned as improper. For example, courts have observed that unlike civil subpoenas, the specificity requirement under Rule 17 subpoenas requires sharply defined categories of documents, not those categories that he said that's journal thoughts. In Bowman, for example, the Supreme Court rejected a catch-all provision, saying that we need to be specific and relevant. Now here, Hunter has sought to obtain entire files rather than specific documents. Courts have quashed subpoenas as being improper discovery advices. No blind fishing expeditions are allowed here. Similarly, Hunter is attempting to preempt this defect. He's trying to get more discovery than he's entitled to. One not even go further than Hunter's assertion that the subpoena recipients are, quote, likely to have relevant materials in their possession. So they say this is very circular. Hunter has framed his own discovery requests, and unlike civil discovery, which is what this is analogous to, the likelihood that materials are responsive to these requests is immaterial to the criminal standards. And gives us some examples here. He says, for example, he gave us attachment A. It makes no bones about being broadly sweeping civil discovery requests. So basically, Abby Lowell, who I don't think is a criminal lawyer much at all, I don't know actually about that. But it sounds like he's saying that you used a civil discovery request. It contains a definitions section and expansive descriptions of documents and communications. It includes, quote, instructions, broad commands on production, which is all governed just by regular rules of criminal procedure, which have discovery requirements about what is supposed to be disclosed. Like, you don't have to define it because it's a criminal case, right? There's rules of criminal procedure. So he's saying, this looks like, to me, it's a civil document. Now, lastly, each category seems to be extremely broad, including items that were never communicated to, even seen by, or interacted with the special counsel. Now, this leads me to believe that maybe Abbe Lowell is not really interested in the court of law, right? Maybe he's more interested in the court of public opinion, and he's just trying to open up blows towards the government to see if they'll do something to come back. But that's not generally a good strategy. Now, none of these categories identify specific evidence that relates to any of the decision makers, in this case, the special counsel, David Weiss. Instead, their requests are self-evidently from Hunter an attempt to find out, quote, whether any material exists that Hunter can turn to his advantage in a pretrial motion. And Rule 17 permits the use of compulsory process only to obtain evidence for use at trial, not material to give them use for their preferred narratives. Now, lastly, the specificity demanded by Rule 17 is not empty formalism. Here, Hunter's broadly worded requests appear to encompass both personal and official documents, including those over which the executive branch may retain a variety of possible privileges. But the lack of identification of anything specific is a problem. And says, likewise, regulations that govern the disclosure of DOJ materials in possession of former DOJ employees, the government is unable to assess the applicability or the propriety of any of this disclosure. Like, they want stuff we haven't even seen yet, and we can't tell you if we can even get it to them. Only once those materials are specifically identified with specificity can the government then decide whether it's appropriate to even turn this stuff over. And so the government must respectfully, therefore, reserve the right to bring additional arguments as to privilege later. So Supreme Court precedent concludes the government on both selective and vindictive prosecutions compels the denial of this motion for several reasons. Even absent the pleading requirements, Hunter's allegations focus on likely inadmissible, far-reaching, non-specific categories of documents concerning the actions and motives of individuals who did not make the relevant prosecutorial decisions in this case, Trump and Barr. On allegations about disparate treatment or discriminatory intent regarding the special counsel, Hunter's motion is notably deficient. The courts say the same. Hunter must make a credible showing of this before going any further. And now, under this lens, Hunter's requests are even more untenable. So therefore, this court should decline to allow these subpoenas to be issued. Do not allow Hunter to circumvent these criminal subpoenas, especially with these types of claims. Signed by Leo Wise, who's the same guy who was there trying to cram the plea deal through. Okay, so do you see what's happened now? Leo Wise is having to really come through hard and deliver the blow to Hunter, even though he was the guy who tried to cram it through in the first place. So that is the response from the special counsel. They're going after Hunter. Now, Hunter obviously is somebody who is being prosecuted for very minor offenses, something that we think should be dramatically, increased. Just be. Let me see if I can. See if I could boost the audio a bit, but I don't think I can. All right, so we'll leave that alone. I won't play with it now. Hunter also is being asked about bank records, or there are concerns about bank records that are floating around the country right now, because the Oversight Committee has said that they found these records, and it shows there is some collusion between the Hunter Biden bank account and Joe Biden's bank account. You see, this is an ACH authorization agreement showing that Owasco PC, the Hunter Biden bank account for his professional corporation, is transacting with Joseph Biden Jr., and they're transferring $1,300, $1,380 every month in a transaction. And you see signatures here. Robert Hunter Biden signed off on this. Here's the date, 9/1/2018. Joe Biden gave him a check, says void on it. Joe Biden's bank accounts. You see this was for repeat types of deposits, and numerous deposits were made. Apparently there were 3 of them that ultimately went out. But this is what landed in front of Congress, and so they had some questions about this. This is what James Comer said about the Biden crime family during his testimony.
If Joe Biden loaned his son money, that's great, but his son paid it back. If it were a loan, which it wasn't, he paid it back through influence peddling. Joe Biden knew the only place his son was getting money at this time. They said, well, he had bad credit. He couldn't afford his 3rd vehicle. He already had a Porsche, Liz, at this time. He had a Porsche and another car. This was his 3rd car. And he's, apparently on drugs. I mean, should he be driving to begin with?
Probably not.
This is his 3rd vehicle he had. And the money that Hunter paid Joe back, if it were in fact a loan, came from China. That's a fact.
Yeah, it's basically Joe Biden is kind of pimping his son out there to get out there and go after that money. And when Joe Biden was asked about this, said, hey, can you explain any of this, Joe? He says, no, there's nothing to hear. It's all a lie. Here is Joe.
President Biden on Ukraine and also China. There's polling by the Associated Press that shows that almost 70% of Americans, including 40% of Democrats, believe that you acted either illegally or unethically in regards to your family's business interests. Can you explain to the Americans, amid this impeachment inquiry, why you interacted with so many of your son and brother's foreign business associates?
I'm not going to comment on that. I did not, and it's just a bunch of lies.
You didn't interact with many of their business associates?
I did not. There's lies.
All right, so he's very irritated about that. And you can see, even if you just watch his facial features, man, he just goes very upset about that. He kind of, that anger is permeating through his face, which is, getting more interesting by the day. So that is what the bank record looks like. And Congress is saying, all right, Hunter, well, you better show up, right? We're waiting for you to be here. They sent this letter on December 6th over from Congress, and it is to Abe Lowell from Winston and Strawn. It's to Hunter's lawyer. And they said, hey, Mr. Lowell, on November 8th, 2023, we issued subpoenas to your client, Robert Hunter Biden, for a deposition on December 13th. Now, we received your letters dated November 28th and December 6th saying that you would be there for deposition subpoenas, about deposition subpoenas. And contrary to the assertions in their letters, your letter, there is no, quote, choice for Biden, Hunter, to make. The subpoenas compel him to appear for a deposition on December 13th, and if Hunter does not appear for his deposition on December 13th, the committees will initiate contempt of Congress proceedings. And so that got signed by Jim Jordan, chairman of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, and James Comer. So Jim Jordan and James Comer, I signed them the wrong way. But those are the two people who signed off on this. And of course, we will continue to see what happens on this case. I think that they opened up a can of worms that they probably don't want to open, and they did, and so we'll see where it goes. My friends, we'll be here continuing to cover. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing as we cover this and more, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends, so we are going to skip the third segment because the audio is not looking so good. I'm seeing a lot of complaints out there, so we're just going to skip it because it's a heavy audio segment, and so we'll just leave it there. But we covered two good segments today. Hunter objecting to the subpoena in Delaware. We also have Fani's January 6th collusion being exposed. And so now it is time to hear from you. Of course, after the show, we are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our members only after party. We also have our website, robertgovea.com, where we would love to have you head on over and join up and get our daily newsletter, as well as take a look at all of the various reports that are there on the website. And so now let's take a look at who is joining us on the day. We had some great people join us. Thank you, V, for clipping away for us on the day. Ray Ronk is joining us, says, has been a member for 2 months, says, the media and the libs are too funny. I love the trolling. I love the sarcasm. I love the clapbacks from President Trump. And that is why we love him. He's pretty funny. There's no doubt about that. And he really gets them riled up. Carrie Graspus is here. Grapsis is here. What's up, Carrie G? Says, hey guys, Robert, I appreciate your show so much. Ever since I've been listening to you, I've turned off the news. I appreciate listening to the facts of these cases. Thank you, Carrie. That is awesome. Thank you for saying that. And the news is really hard to listen to, honestly. I mean, I really stopped listening to it. I get my news elsewhere. And when I turn on the news, I realize how stupid it is. Like those dumb questions that we heard Trump got. So thanks for being a member of our locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and thanks for the lovely dono, Carrie. We got Don't Be Hatin', says, tip to promote peace of mind for Rob and the chat to sleep well, regardless of what happens with our technology today. And thank you for that, Don't Be Hatin'. Very, very nice recommendation. Don't need to throw printers or computers out the window. We can just have nice peace and peaceful breathing. Spuds is here, says Rob needs a green Mr. T mohawk. And maybe one day, maybe a boy can dream. Knox says, happy Wednesday all. My guess is Fani is being told to hold her ground on this. Her father was a legendary lawyer and a former Black Panther. I think so too. I mean, this is like history-making case. All she's got to do is just see this through, and she'll write book deals and probably do a documentary and the whole thing, right? That's it. We got Dolphin Fan is the man in the house, making 5 new membos in the donos, bringing in No Mandates, bringing in Susio, bringing in Scott P, RJM, and Cheney W. courtesy of Dolphin Fan is the man in the house. And thank you, Dolphin Fan, for bringing that one in. We got Knox Bierman's here, says, okay, so Trump would be a dictator, but it's Liz Cheney telling me that I, quote, must do things and how I must see things. Yeah. And they're the ones that mandated everything down our gullets, and they censored all of us, and they told us we were crazy, and they deluded us with fake Russian disinfo propaganda. I mean, it's all, they're the dictators. CF Rob is here, says, what kind of witness can Liz Cheney be? She listened to the secondhand witness that gave her opinions like Clavicle Girl. I heard that Donald Trump and Go-Go Gadget Arms grabbed the steering wheel. Well, was she there in Congress? I mean, was she there at the Capitol? I don't know. Like, we don't really know who the extent of the witnesses are. Like, did she see something? Did she respond to something? Was she talking to somebody? I don't know. She could be an actual, witness who observed things. She could be a process witness. Remember, they're trying to get in 404B evidence, like character evidence about Trump's prior statements and stuff. She could be somebody who talks about, the threats of Trump, I would say. I don't know. Who knows what Judge Chutkan's going to let her in? Maybe Chutkan will put her up on the bench alongside her like Engeron's Greenfield. Who knows? Niawi is here as a supporter. Welcome aboard. Niawi in the house. Very nice to have you. Thanks for being a membo. Sam in Texas says, the FBI DC office is disgusting. They post about every J6er who they prosecute. So bold. Lick the boot or stand up and fight for our country peacefully. Exactly right. Yeah, I think that's right. And you can, if you're Donald Trump, you get indicted for saying fight like hell. But I do think we need to fight for our country peacefully and politically. And we need to use our voices and use our communities and use our resources to stay energized and stay connected and get out the vote, get out the vote as we march on. Wendy K's here on Locals, says the Dems don't realize that they can't unring the bell. Trump can and should use the same mechanisms that they did. Yeah, it's only fair. They built this house. So, if this is what they think is appropriate governance, then I guess that's how it goes. We got Mexican Marauder is here. Welcome as a membo. Mexican Marauder became a membo on the tubes. We got, oh my gosh, Ivanka passed Chris Christie. That's hilarious. From MAGA Hat Stays. That's on election betting odds. And so apparently Ivanka passed Christie on election betting odds. How funny. NY Renal says, yes, vindictive prosecution. When they allow the statute of limitations to run out on a major part of the case, yeah, Hunter hasn't been prosecuted for the vast majority of things that he could have been. We have Freedom Forever says, except on day one, drill, 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 and close the border. Drill, 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 or close the border. We've got this one from Knox Bierman. Knox says, maybe Hunter can cite Trump's case to meet the similarly situated element. Yeah, so Trump is also being vindictively and selectively prosecuted, but by his daddy's DOJ. So they could start pinging off each other. Yeah, by the end of this case, Hunter and Trump, they might be bros. They're like, man, this DOJ is whacked. These people are whacked over there. It's like, finally, they're prosecuting us for all sorts of stuff. Hey, even enemies of your enemies can be your friends or something like that. It's like, hey, if Hunter is going to be blasting the DOJ and the DOJ is going to be blasting Hunter, it's like, man, it's hard to take sides on this one, Yeah, the DOJ is corrupt and Hunter is a piece of garbage. So what do we do here? That's the point. It's like they don't want to be fighting that way. It's not good for them. We all get to see it and enjoy it. Good to see you, Knox. Wendy K says, Hunter's protected right is that his daddy is the president of the United States. All right, it seems very, very weak for somebody whose daddy runs the country to say, I'm being victimized by a government prosecution. It's like, no, you're not, dude. Your dad's the president. Yeah, what else do you want? We got NY says, Hunter Biden's lawyers wanted the name and the address book to everyone who bought his laptop transcript book. Oh, I'm sure about that. I would imagine that. I'm sure that's true. Wendy K says that they want that. Wendy K says, off context, but just love how Rob switches out words for the no-no words that are in the documents. Well, we try to make it a family show. We try to make it a family show, something that, dinner table manners around here. Thank you, Wendy K. We got Chris is here. Chris, no question, but a nice dono, and thank you for the fist bump, my friend. I appreciate you being there and supporting us. And Weiss says, if all Biden can put forward is that lies, look forward to no presidential debates between Trump and Biden. I don't think so for sure. Yeah, they're not going to debate him. They're going to say he's not going to debate an insurrectionist. Not only isn't Biden up for it, but I don't think the Dems would allow him to be confronted directly. Yeah, they'll come up with an excuse, like he's not going to debate an insurrectionist, right? Is something that they'll say. I can feel that one already. Chris is here, been a membo for 4 months. Chris, thank you for that, brother. I've been a membo. It says, thank you, Robert. I'm so glad that I found you all. We're glad you found us too. Thanks for being a member. Thanks for supporting us, especially for 4 months. First month's the hardest. You know how that goes. We got NY Renal says, Liz Cheney wanted to surf the wave of the anti-Trump sentiment. If the January 6th committee had shown anything worth noticing, she should have used it to better herself politically within the Republican Party, but it backfired. Now she's a pariah and only interested as a Democrat in anti-Trump curiosity. Yeah, I think she's just scrambling to stay relevant. I mean, she got thrown out of Congress. She's got a book. So maybe she'll run for office and do something, useful there for like the Democrats or for the Republicans, or like she's got to fight for relevancy, because otherwise what's she going to do? We got our friends over on the X platform. Let's see who is joining us over there. We got a couple comments on it. We got 16 viewers on X, man. That's pretty good. Even though the audio's not 100% today, it's pretty good. We got 16 viewers. Shout out to our X friends. We got HR 503. There it is. Yeah, 13 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed after consultation with the minority leader. Never happened. How many people were on the J6 committee? Huh. It was 9, right? It was 2 Republicans, Kinzinger and Cheney, and then it was 5 Democrats. Thompson, was Schiff on there, and others, right? I can't remember all of them. They're obnoxious, but they were on there. And so they were out of order of their own House rules. So this one came in from Vientikis. Looks like a link to an IMDb. Bob was sharing this one. Says there seems to be a separate chat live screen when watching live on X, different from the posts. Yeah, what's going on here? So Bob shared a couple links of comments. He doesn't see the messages posted in the X live chat. That's true. I do not see those. In fact, I don't even know how I would see those. Actually, that's interesting. Can I see those? Okay, so that's myself. Don't want to do that. No, I can't see the live chat in the X. Like I can't, there's no live chat there. You guys are chatting in the X platform? That's interesting. I don't even know where that would be. Okay, what's up, Fred? What's up, V? What's up, Bob? We got Retired Dave. Says the sound is fine on X and YouTube. Love the show. Apparently the levels were off, and I can see that. I can see, kind of consistent complaints. So I'll troubleshoot that. I'm not sure why that is, but it's tubes. It's tubes problems, connecting all the tubes. So my friends, that was it for our friends on the X platform. You can see us there at Rob Govea ESQ. You can also join our Watching the Watchers community. You can search for Watching the Watchers on the X platform. You see we got 935 members, baby. We're growing. And so come check us out. And I'm waiting for us to determine what to do with this group. But it's good to follow your fellow watchers out there and support each other out in the wild on the X platform. And so, my friends, that is going to be it for us on the day. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our members only after party. We would love to see you there. We do members only streams in the mornings. We do Saturday streams. We have some fun stuff cooking. We also have our website, robertgovea.com, where you can sign up for our daily newsletter. You can access any of the documents that we went through there on the website and sign up for our daily newsletter as well. Before we wrap it up here, we want to say thank you to our mods and our meme smiths who mod down the fort for us and keep things nice and orderly. Our friends, Vientikis Prime, we got K Bean in the house. Shout out to Just Cause, Playin' Hooky, Ronnie Cole, our friend Zulu, Beyond Geo. We got Zach Nichols, John Allen, Janek 909, Dog Digger, and Donut Mind Me. Also our meme smiths, Geegum Geegum, Sleepy Dog Lee, and our friend Nathan N810, meme smith in the fort down for us. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. I'm going to go back to the drawing board, try to level out that audio a little bit better, and have for a little bit more smooth stream tomorrow. But we are going to leave it there on this lovely night. I do hope to see you back here tomorrow so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.